evening. You are watching Rajya Sabha television. I am Smriti Rastogi. Many a political colossus has left their indelible mark on post-independent India. But the one leader who changed the country's political course in a revolutionary way was Gandhian socialist Jayaprakash Narayan. Significantly, JP, as he was popularly called, never sought power for himself. JP's call for Sampoorna Kranti, starting with the students' movement against rampant corruption, unemployment and systemic weakening of the democratic institutions way back in 1974, and the subsequent events led to the imposition of the emergency. It eventually paved the way for realignment of political forces in the country and gave a new direction to the politics of the nation with far-reaching ramifications. Today, in depth on the birth anniversary of Jayaprakash Narayan, we recall the political journey of this great Indian leader. When students started protesting in Bihar in 1974, Jayaprakash Narayan has been out of politics for several years. However, he decided to lead the students, turning the protest into a massive movement that came to be known as the JP movement. The JP movement changed the political landscape of India. It was during this movement that JP gave his call for Sampoorna Kranti and scripted the fall of the Indira Gandhi government. In 1974, then country witnessed widespread discontent over high inflation, unemployment and lack of essential commodities. Students took to streets in many parts of the country. After the Navnirman movement in Gujarat, students in Bihar started an agitation against the misrule and corruption of the state government. The Bihar government used brute forces to suppress the movement. On 18 March 1974, police fired on unarmed protesters, killing 8 people and sparking protests across the state. On 8 April 1974, a silent procession led by JP was lathi-charged in Patna. On 5 June 1974, JP addressed a large crowd at Gandhi Maidan in Patna. He gave the call for total revolution or Sampoorna Kranti. He said, and I quote, "This is a revolution, friends. We are not here merely to see the Vidhan Sabha dissolved. That is only one milestone in our journey, but we have a long way to go. After 27 years of freedom, people of this country are racked by hunger, rising prices, corruption, oppressed by every kind of injustice. It is a total revolution we want, nothing less." Unquote. According to Jayaprakash Narayan, total revolution was a combination of 7 revolutions: political, social, economic, cultural, ideological or intellectual, educational and spiritual. All of this to bring a change in the existing society. The movement intensified after the call for total revolution. Protests led to closure of colleges and universities on 15 July 1974. JP urged students to boycott examinations. On 4 November 1974, protesting students and their leaders began demanding the resignation of MLAs. Trying hard to stop people from reaching Patna, the government lathi-charged the protesters. On 18 November 1974, at a massive gathering in Patna, JP gave the call to throw out the Congress government of Indira Gandhi at the centre. The Bihar movement turned into a satyagraha, and volunteers kept protesting at the Bihar Legislative Assembly. Many were arrested on 4 December 1974. JP continued to travel across the country, uniting opposition parties to defeat the Congress. The next year, Congress suffered major blows, first in Gujarat, where it lost. On 12 June 1975, the Allahabad High Court declared Indira Gandhi's guilt of electoral malpractice, declaring her election to the Lok Sabha in the 1971 general election void. The court ordered her to be removed from the Lok Sabha seat and banned her from contesting elections for 6 years, effectively removing her as the Prime Minister of the country. Demanding her immediate resignation, Jayaprakash Narayan stepped up mass protests. On 24th June, the Supreme Court stayed the verdict of the Allahabad High Court conditionally. On 25th June, JP held a massive rally in Delhi calling for a satyagraha or non-violent civil disobedience to force the government to resign. He also appealed to the police, armed forces and government servants not to obey the illegal and immoral orders of the government. An unprecedented response from the government followed, with Indira Gandhi imposing a nationwide emergency on the midnight of 25th June 1975, citing public and civil disorder a threat to the national security. Along with other opposition leaders, Jayaprakash Narayan was arrested and jailed in Chandigarh. His health deteriorated on 24th October and he was released on 12th November when he was diagnosed with kidney failure. On 18th January 1977, Indira Gandhi revoked emergency and announced elections in the country. JP led a united front of opposition parties, Janata Party, to take on Indira Gandhi in elections. The Janata Party was voted to power in the elections and became the first non-Congress party to form a government at the centre with Morarji Desai as the Prime Minister. The JP movement had achieved one of its prime objectives, overthrowing the Indira Gandhi government. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Jayaprakash Narayan is known as a freedom fighter, theorist, socialist and a political leader. An analytical thinker of socialism with a focus on creating a good life for all, JP, as he was popularly known, was able to recognize the inequality that was prevalent in the country at that time. Let's take a look at Jayaprakash Narayan's journey.
Jayaprakash Narayan, born in Sitab Deara village of Bihar, would have turned 116 today. He was born in the early hours of October 11, 1902. His father, Harsudayal, had once boasted, "My son will be a great man someday." When JP was just 9, he left his village to enroll in class 7 at the collegiate school in Patna. This was his first break from village life. He stayed at a Saraswati Bhavan, a student's hostel, in which most of the boys were older than him. Among them were some of Bihar's future leaders, including its first Chief Minister Krishna Singh, his deputy Anugrah Narayan Singh, and several others who were to become known names in politics and the academic world. In October 1920, when JP turned 18, he was married to Braj Kishore Prasad's daughter Prabhavati Devi. She too was a freedom fighter in her own right. Soon after the Rowlatt Act of 1919 was passed by the British, Jayaprakash Narayan, along with some friends, went to listen to Maulana Abul Kalam Azad speak about the non-cooperation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi. Maulana was a brilliant orator and his call to give up English education made sense to the young Jayaprakash. He soon left Patna College just 20 days before his final examinations and joined the Bihar Vidyapeeth, a college founded by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. He was among the first students of Dr. Anugrah Narayan Sinha. However, a year later, JP boarded a cargo ship for the United States, where he continued his studies. Jayaprakash reached California on 8 October 1922 and was admitted to Berkeley in January 1923. He picked up small jobs that would help him pay for his education. During this period, he was also fired by the ideas of Karl Marx. Upon his return to India in 1929, JP joined the Congress, answering a call to join the freedom struggle. In 1932, he was sentenced to a year in jail for his participation in the civil disobedience movement. Upon release, he took a leading path in the formation of the Congress Socialist Party, a left-wing group within the Congress Party. He was imprisoned by the British again in 1939 for his opposition to Indian participation in World War II, but he made a dramatic escape. He organized violent resistance to the British government before his recapture in 1943. After his release in 1946, he tried to persuade the Congress leaders to adopt a more militant policy against British rule. In 1948, he, along with most of the Congress socialists, left the party and in 1952 formed the Praja Socialist Party. Between 1947 and 1953, Jayaprakash Narayan was president of the All India Railwaymen's Federation, the largest labour union in the Indian Railways. Soon becoming dissatisfied with party politics, he announced in 1954 that he would thenceforth devote his life exclusively to the Bhudan Yagna movement founded by Vinoba Bhave, which promoted distribution of lands to the landless and untouchables. He gave up his land to set up an ashram in Hazaribagh and worked towards uplifting the poor. JP's continuing interest in political problems, however, was revealed when in 1959 he argued for a reconstruction of Indian polity by means of a four-tiered hierarchy of village, district, state and union councils.
जेपी को 79 साल की का जीवन मिला, उस जीवन में जेपी अपने जीवन भर प्रयोग करते रहे और वह प्रयोग इसलिए करते रहे क्योंकि जब वो पढ़ते थे तो उन्होंने क्रांति की दीक्षा ली थी। तो ये क्रांति के माध्यम से गरीब आदमी का या इस राज्य व्यवस्था में कैसा परिवर्तन हो जिससे कि आम आदमी को उसको अवसर मिले, शिक्षा का अवसर मिले, उत्थान का अवसर मिले, रोजगार का अवसर मिले, इसके लिए जेपी पूरी जिंदगी तलाश करते रहे और उन्होंने ये पाया था कि भूदान आंदोलन से संभवतः ये राज्य व्यवस्था और समाज व्यवस्था बदलेगी।
More memorable than JP's departure from electoral politics was his return to it in 1974. To see him merely as a counter to the increasingly authoritarian face of Indira Gandhi around the time of the emergency is to miss the point. The stirrings of the restless 1970s began well before the declaration of emergency in June 1975. Indira Gandhi revoked emergency on 18th January 1977 and announced elections. The Janata Party was formed under JP's guidance. The party was voted into power and became the first non-Congress party to form a government at the centre. Jayaprakash Narayan died in Patna on 8th October 1979, 3 days before his 77th birthday. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
With that, time for a very short break. Stay with us.
Watch The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira, at 6:30 p.m.
Welcome back. Jayaprakash Narayan spent the first 25 years after independence spearheading causes like Praja Socialist Party and the Sarvodaya movement. But it was his contribution towards bringing all the opposition parties together and form the Janata Party that catalyzed political forces that became a definitive chapter in the Indian politics. During the freedom movement, Jayaprakash Narayan was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. The close bond he formed with them played a major role in developing his political ideology. Jayaprakash Narayan joined the Indian National Congress and served as secretary in its newly formed Labour Department in 1929. He also took part in the civil disobedience movement and after the arrest of top Congress leaders became General Secretary in 1932. He built an underground organization to propagate the movement throughout the country. This led to his imprisonment. Jayaprakash Narayan felt that along with national independence, India needed socialism. He decided to form a socialist party that would function within the framework of the nationalist movement while drawing workers and peasants into the struggle. Thus, JP formed the Congress Socialist Party in 1934 along with Narendra Deva, Minu Masani, Achyut Patwardhan, Yusuf Meher Ali, Ram Manohar Lohia and others. Jayaprakash Narayan and Narendra Deva ensured the adoption of Marxism as the party's ideology. In 1942, Mahatma Gandhi launched the Quit India movement. Jayaprakash Narayan led it from the front after top Congress leaders were arrested.
जेपी की जो विशेषता है वह दूसरे नेताओं से जेपी इस मायने में भिन्न है कि वो शुरू से बचपन से ही त्याग और तपस्या का उनका जीवन है। 1940 में जब दूसरा विश्व युद्ध 1939 में छिड़ा और 1940 में जब भारत की आज़ादी की लड़ाई अपने चरम पर थी, तो मैं ये पाता हूँ कि केवल दो व्यक्ति हैं जो एक स्वर में बोल रहे हैं और एक संदेश दे रहे हैं। एक तरफ महात्मा गांधी जो कहते हैं कि अंग्रेजों भारत छोड़ दो, उसी तरह से जेपी कहते हैं कि हमको पूरी आज़ादी चाहिए।
Jayaprakash Narayan, or JP as he was known, also played an important role in national integration after independence. In the communal tensions after the partition, JP worked to establish peace. India's independence saw JP committed to the ideology of democratic socialism and sought to guide the Congress Socialist Party. Though initially a defender of physical force, JP adopted Gandhiji's ideas like Satyagraha and Ahimsa. After the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, Jayaprakash Narayan and others led the Congress Socialist Party out of the Indian National Congress and formed the Socialist Party, later called the Praja Socialist Party, the principal opposition in states like Bihar and UP. In 1954, Jayaprakash Narayan dedicated himself to Acharya Vinoba Bhave's Bhudan movement to distribute land to the downtrodden masses and the ideal of Sarvodaya. In 1957, he severed himself from the Praja Socialist Party to promote Lokniti as opposed to Rajniti. His goal was to evolve Lokniti to build a consensus-based, classless, participatory democracy termed Sarvodaya. Its ideology was Gandhian socialism, and JP became an important national figure. In 1974, he led the peasant struggle in Bihar, which demanded the resignation of the state government. He was also instrumental in setting up Citizens for Democracy in 1974 and the People's Union for Civil Liberties in 1976, non-governmental organizations.
1954 में जेपी और आचार्य कृपलानी दोनों गया में मिले और दोनों उस समय आचार्य कृपलानी प्रजा समाजवादी पार्टी के नेता थे। भूदान का एक बड़ा सम्मेलन वहाँ हो रहा था, दोनों मंच पर साथ गए। वहाँ पहुँचने के बाद जेपी ने अचानक, सोचा होगा लेकिन वहाँ उन्होंने किसी को बताया नहीं, अचानक उन्होंने घोषणा की कि विनोबा जी जो भूदान आंदोलन चला रहे हैं उसके लिए मैं अपना जीवन दान करता हूँ।
Jayaprakash Narayan is remembered the most for his role during emergency. In 1975, the Allahabad High Court, on an election petition filed by Raj Narayan, found then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi guilty of corrupt electoral practices and set aside her election to the Lok Sabha. The opposition, led by Jayaprakash Narayan, called for Indira's resignation. Jayaprakash Narayan called for Sampoorna Kranti, or total revolution, to bring social change in the country against the Congress. After widespread protest, Indira Gandhi had to revoke emergency in 1977. In the elections that followed, opposition parties united under JP's leadership to form the Janata Party and contested against the Congress. The people's displeasure regarding the emergency found voice in an overwhelming defeat for Indira Gandhi and the Congress. The Janata Party became the first non-Congress party to rule at the centre. Jayaprakash Narayan did not participate in the government but provided moral support, playing elder statesman. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And that's all we have for you in today's edition of In Depth. We will be back same time tomorrow with a focus on some other important subject. You can also watch our episodes online on YouTube and Twitter and get back to us with your valuable feedback and suggestions. Thank you for watching.